Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Pink Lemonade podcast. I'm going to be your host, So Panda. If you are not familiar with me or my YouTube channel before, welcome in if this is your first introduction here. But yeah, guys, I am kind of starting out this podcasting journey for the very first time. I've never really done anything like this before. I would say that I'm pretty good at yapping and just talking about a bunch of different things, so I figured I would give it a shot. I also will be taking this opportunity to use this podcast as an outlet for some of my other series that I'm currently working on. So, for example, the main one being Project Geometra and the videos following that. We're going to get a little bit more into that later on in things, but I kind of just wanted to start here on the very first episode and kind of just highlight some things and maybe outline the expectations of what this podcast may look like. So, like I said before, never done this before. So, it's kind of going to be a learning experience as we go. I'm going to be trying a bunch of different things, see what works, see what doesn't. Firstly, if you are watching with a visual, as you can see, we are inside of a Minecraft kind of podcast studio and everything. It's a little interesting, a little quirky. I don't really have a studio space in real life, so I thought, hey, why not build a virtual kind of platform and everything for this? I think it turned out pretty all right. You'll have to let me know down below what you think of the space. But I want to kind of get into what I want to do with this podcast, right? So there's a lot of different things and a lot of different aspects that I'd like to touch upon. And, I guess if I had to list them out, it would be one, like I kind of mentioned earlier, highlighting, kind of behind the scenes stuff of some of my other videos and, just general things that are going on with me and my YouTube channel and having a place or a platform to kind of convey those things. Um, Typically before in the past, I would have just done that in the video, and it would have made it where, say certain videos go on for a longer time because I'm like yapping in the middle of it about just, random IRL happenings or what have you. And I think that moving forward, and why I've kind of gravitated towards this podcast environment is because I want to get away from that. Basically, if I'm in a position where I can take my videos and say the videos have like an overarching story or, kind of lore to them and everything, right? I'd like to make that the focus of the videos and not have it be drug out by random conversations or side tangents, I think that's kind of the way that I'm kind of going to start to shift things, because it's just, I think it'll make for better content. I think it'll make for better interactions. And I think it'll also make it where the videos that I produce and kind of come up with are more meaningful. Uh, Apart from that, there is also the kind of going into, a point that's away from that is there's things that I personally just like want to talk about. I'm really interested in technology. I'm really interested in software, all types of different things. Memes, videos, music, media, like all types of different things that really I would love to talk about. I'd love to convey to an audience of people. But I feel like with my previous video format, I really haven't had, an opportunity to kind of display that or vocalize it. I feel that for the most part, when it comes to those topics, that having something like this, like a podcast, for instance, will make it a lot easier for me to talk about them or transition into them and it not seem so out of place. I make Minecraft videos and everything, but it may not make sense to talk about, oh, this movie that I saw this past weekend in just the middle of a Minecraft video, right? It may not work for that. So that's kind of the other reason why I've wanted to shift focus here and kind of go for this format, right? And I also just wanted to say too, that with this, I feel like every YouTuber goes through this thing where they're like, "Oh, we're gonna start a podcast." Me and the boys are starting a podcast. And it's just like that's the natural progression of things. Um, I don't necessarily disagree with that kind of like a stereotype or judgment. I definitely have felt that previously. But like I said, with that previous point, it's really more of a this is more of an outlet, creativity, creatively. Man, I can't speak, but it's more of a creative outlet, for just things that aren't Minecraft, things that aren't the typical So Panda video and everything. And I think that ultimately, whether this does me good or does it bad, for like the channel or anything like that, I think it's going to become something that, at least for my sake, is going to really open a lot of doors, for me just personally. Right. So that's kind of why I'm going ahead and I'm jumping on it, grabbing the bull by the horns and kind of, jumping into things. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the main things I wanted to outline. I'm sure there's more that like I'm just not thinking of at the moment. It is a little strange to just kind of sit here and talk to the void by yourself. Uh and kind of a key point to mention on that, like this first episode's probably going to be just me. But, I think an interesting piece that we could do in the future is also have like guest appearances, right? We could have people that on the channel. Like we could have Cypher on. We could have people from Project Geometra, like on the server. We could have them on. We could even have fans of the podcast that maybe aren't interacting with like any of the other videos, but let's say they really like the podcast. So maybe they can come on and be interviewed or have interesting things to talk about and everything like that. So I think overall, it's going to be a really fun, a really new and creative experience for not only me, but maybe you guys as well. Uh, this is you know, something brand new. I feel like I keep saying that, but it's something very new to me and something that I can tell already from kind of just this little introductory thing that I'm definitely going to need to work at and get better at. Talking kind of just into a not a void, because the goal is people will be listening, but like kind of just talking out loud and conveying your thoughts kind of in real time is it's interesting. It's very neat and fun. But yeah, I feel like I've done enough yapping on, things like, kind of logistical things for like what this podcast is going to be like. So now I'm going to kind of get into some topics that I've kind of pre-selected here. Um, so I'm assuming that if you are listening in right now on the Pink Lemonade podcast, that you most likely, can't say for certain, you may be listening to this like way far out in the future and everything. But I think at the current moment of me recording this, I feel like most people are here from my Project Geometra series. And kind of with that, I feel like a lot of folks are going to be interested in Project Geometra stuff. So I'm going to, talk about some things regarding that. There's been quite a bit of time since the last video. I think as of right now, it's been about 3 months. If you're listening to this podcast, the newest video has just released, shameless plug, but go check that out. And I think that for the most part, I mean, if you're in the Discord server, you've probably been seeing some of what's been going on, but there's also a lot of moving parts behind the scenes. And I'm not going to detail, everything. I'm not going to sit here and tell you exactly how we do every facet of every mechanic and everything. But I think it might be interesting for some folks to kind of hear some of the challenges and hardships and things we've kind of just overcome since the initial launch of the server and the series and everything like that. So I guess the best way to do this is to kind of start from ground zero and kind of highlight what the entire process has been like so far, just for anyone that's not informed. So me and my buddy Cypher, we decided to start a YouTube series. This is the second rendition of this YouTube series, Project Geometra. We had this initial concept way back in the day, probably a year now at this point, of a Cobblemon Minecraft server, right, that we would play on as the YouTubers, and we would build a city, right? And in this city, there would be NPCs, there would be moving parts, it would have a story, there would be overarching lore, themes that we've established kind of behind the scenes and lore things. And the eventual goal of that first series was to open up the server at the end of the series, at the end of the YouTube series, for the public. And when we did this initial concept, it was really solid. We got off to a great start. We came up with, tons and tons and tons of lore. Like, we were leaning really heavy into the lore aspect of things. And we decided that, ultimately that was going to be kind of like the main focus of this first iteration of Geometra. Like, we really wanted to convey this story, these themes, and these things that really would separate this YouTube series from YouTube series before it, really getting away from like the Let's Play kind of aspect of things. And I feel like with the first iteration, we did a pretty good job with that. I don't think it was too much on the nose of a Let's Play. There was definitely elements of a Let's Play in there, but it definitely had some themes towards the end of it that, we're getting to a point where you could definitely see a story starting to unfold, right? Well, newsflash, we're on the second iteration of Geometra. So what kind of happened between then and now? Well, real life. That's what ultimately happened. There was a lot of things going on in not only my personal real life, but some of the other members' real lives. And it kind of naturally, kind of like, not, I don't want to say killed, because killed is like a really negative word, right? But I feel like it definitely hurt the momentum of what we had going on. And it eventually led it to a place where it was pretty much just like dead in the water, the whole idea. We had a Discord server. We had about, 100 people in the Discord server, I think, who were like, I would say maybe only like 50% of those people were actually like planning on joining the server and playing once it eventually launched. But we kind of built up this hype bubble for this thing, and it kind of died out, right? It was kind of like a too close to the sun Icarus situation, if you can kind of convey that and relate that or whatever. But ultimately, when we ended things, we were left with kind of this weird spot, right? Where we had, about 100 people who were kind of still interested in this really unique, really interesting concept, but we just weren't moving anywhere on it. Now we flash forward to about, I want to say like September, maybe November of this current year. Well, I guess it was 2024. It wasn't 2025. And there's there's sneak peeks coming out for a new Cobblemon update, which if you remember from like the very beginning of this story, is the main mod of Project Geometra. It's like Cobblemon focused. It's Pokemon, right? And there's sneak peeks coming out, and that kind of reinvigorates me and my buddy Cypher, and we're kind of like, hey, like, we should redo Geometra. It was such a good idea. We should really, try to bank on Geometra when this new Cobblemon update comes out. And so we started working on it, me and him. And when we started working on it this time around, we came at it with a different approach. We thought in our heads, we definitely wanted the aspect of like, hey, viewers are going to get to join the server and play with the people who record the YouTube videos. Like, that's kind of the main thing that's like separates Geometra from like other series, right? it's kind of like the cool aspect of like, yeah, you get to go play with your like your favorite YouTubers, right? I'm not saying we're people's favorite YouTubers. Maybe you'll argue against me, but like I definitely don't feel like that, right? And it's kind of this interesting concept that's never really been done before. I feel, or at least not that I'm aware of, right? YouTubers all the time will make servers that like their fans can join and everything for like Patreon and like whatever. But, ultimately what that looks like is like, oh, you're fans of this person. Well, I'm also a fan. Let's just get together and play on the same server, right? And then the actual content creator doesn't really play a ton on that server because they have other things that are like more important or, whatever they got going on. But, to get off that side tangent, so we definitely wanted to keep the aspect of people being able to join the server and play with us. And kind of what we differed from this time around, though, was we were like, hey, maybe what killed the hype and what killed the momentum and what killed the drive was obviously the IRL things that were happening. But it also, there were certain points in time where it just seemed like this huge mountain of tasks that we had to do before the players could actually hop on and play the server, right? So we took a different approach this time where basically we decided like, hey, what if we just got the foundational layer for a city, right? And for the server, got some plots, made it kind of a unique experience so people could still play Minecraft and everything. But we actually opened up the server like pretty much day one, right? Like, and I'll get into more of that when I say the words day one, because it's not actually day one, but kind of the concept of like people would be on the server from the very beginning, and then they would see the story unfold as time progressed, right? And so with this, we decided to do that. That was 99% of the development of what became the second iteration of Project Geometra. We had to come up with the mod pack, work out custom, tweaks and modifications and configs and everything, and come up with systems so that people could play Minecraft, right, in this confined space with us, but also make it to where, the integrity of the city was kept and not like destroyed, and us having like random dirt towers and, people griefing and stealing stuff from people's all that fun stuff. Right. And so what we ultimately decided on, and this is kind of a key component of things to mention, so that's what I'm kind of getting at right now, is a system devised of plots, right? And a system where players would apply to join the server, right? They'd have to go through a little application process, and it wasn't super vetted. It wasn't like, oh, we're denying people. Pretty much if you applied, you got accepted. And the plots were, set up in a way so that like players could build and destroy blocks in their own plot and, hang out, build bases in their plot. But outside of that, they couldn't really do anything, right? Like couldn't break blocks, couldn't place blocks, couldn't interact with blocks for the most part and everything. And so that right there presents an interesting challenge, right? Because there's things like resources, like how do players get iron or diamonds or, these things that they need for tools or cobblemon items or other modded items that we have in the mod pack and everything like that. So that's kind of where we started designing and implementing these systems of ore geodes, right? And an economy with NPCs and shops, right? And so essentially there would be like select areas where certain ore geodes would spawn, like we would naturally place them. And these ore geodes would be ores, like diamond, copper, iron, gold, lap, all the Minecraft ores and everything. I don't need to go too far into that, but basically, just these resources that players would need, and they would regenerate, right? That was helping I can't even speak. That was done with the help of a mod called Regenerating Ores. Shout out to them. Awesome mod. Have probably carried a lot of things when it comes to that. aspect. Honestly, like, I don't know what we would have done for like ore accumulation or anything like that if we wouldn't have had that mod. But one of the main things also was the economy system, right? So basically, anything that you couldn't get from an ore geode, we had to develop NPCs where players could trade currency for items. So things like wood, things like saplings, which I don't think we ended up using saplings, but you know what I mean, like materials that ultimately like you would need for builds or you would need for construction of things, but that you just couldn't go out into the world and accumulate, right? So, that was a pretty interesting process. We developed an entire mod specifically with our own currency system, Geometra coins. Shout out to that. I personally developed that with the help of Cypher with some texturing from him. And we were at a point where we released our first YouTube video on this thing. Or actually, no, let me go back a step real quick. We pretty much had the system in place where we were like, okay, like, yeah, we think things are in a pretty solid state. We think we're ready to go. Let's record our first episode and then we'll upload the YouTube video, right? And when we uploaded the YouTube video, it was pretty well timed. It was right around the time of that new Cobblemon update and everything like that. And I don't want to say the video blew up because it's definitely not the most successful video I've had on my channel in terms of blowing up, right? And I think the same. I think I could say the same for Cypher and everything, but it attracted a lot of people. I mean, within the very first day of that YouTube video being uploaded, we saw the Discord go from like a little under 100 members. I think I said 100 earlier, but like it was really like 90 something or whatever. We saw that number jump from like 90 something to like almost 300, and on the precipice of 400 people that kind of joined the Discord in basically a 24-hour span, right? And that got us really excited for the project. We were super hyped. We were like, okay, like we've got people that are interested, people that are gonna join and play, and it's gonna be this fun experience. We had the application up as well. We had like over 200 applications on like the very first day of these, them being available and everything like that. And so, we're hyped. We're in great spirit. We're looking forward to this. We're a little bit cautious because like we understand that like, hey, this is modded Minecraft. Typically with modded Minecraft servers, if you're not familiar, doing something like a large player-based server is typically not really executed in many instances. I can't personally think of a server that like has like 100 players on it and it's like a full blown modded server and everything. There's probably ones that exist out there, but I just can't think of any. And so we were kind of weary, we were kind of cautious and everything, but we went into it with good spirits, high hopes, and eventually we came upon the day where we were accepting people onto the server, right? We did a huge like live stream. Cypher did a live stream of this. There was like 150 people in the live stream, like all waiting to join in. We had a Discord event going on. If you're familiar with that, like the Discord stage and everything. I was helping behind the scenes, like through the application process, and we were there accepting applications because the thing to keep in mind too is that we technically had to like manually whitelist and give people Pokemon. I forgot to mention that earlier, but one of the other appeals to us was when people joined, they would get a custom starter Pokemon, right, of their choosing. And we had some limits and expectations on that where, you couldn't get anything super, super crazy. But, for the most part, like pretty much, I would say like a good 90% of the Pokemon that are in the Cobblemon mod were just like good to go, like off rip. Like you could just have that as your starter, right? And the key takeaway from this that I'm kind of getting to is that all this had to be done manually, right? So when we had this live stream, we're calling people's names, we're pinging them in Discord. We're like, oh, like, it's your turn to get like whitelisted, get your Pokemon, get your plot, and everything like that. And all this had to be manually assigned, right? And keep in mind, at this point, it is only me and Cypher who are running this whole shebang, right? Like it is, we have no support staff, we have like no one helping us. It is just the two of us, right? And hindsight 2020, but looking back at it, that was a kind of a horrible way to do that, right? Like we spent the better part of 10 hours accepting player applications and getting them starters and getting them plots and everything. And, the whole process was, it really wasn't smooth for the most part. Like it definitely could have been executed a lot better. And we've kind of built upon that and learned better ways to execute it than we previously have done. But one of the main things that was happening was about the time we hit 50 concurrent players on the server, because everybody was hyped, everybody was trying to play. We started experiencing crashes on the server, right? And to be honest, this was kind of expected. This wasn't super unexpected that we would have to deal with some crashes. I mean, there's a lot of people joining, a lot of people loading chunks that haven't been loaded for the first time. We did have a world border, to kind of decrease that and everything. But it pretty much every single time we would hit about 50 or 60 players, it would inevitably be like a good 30, 45 minutes, and then we would experience a crash, right? And at first, we thought this was because of hardware limitations on the server, like the actual server side of things. And we quickly realized, well, not quickly, it was probably about a couple days to maybe a week, that it actually wasn't the hardware limitations. We upgraded the server to like double, basically like double the performance of it, essentially. And we were still running into these same issues. And what ultimately was discovered through this process is that somewhere in the world during one of the crashes, there were chunks, right, that were just corrupted. And there was really nothing we could do about it. We couldn't reset them. We couldn't get close enough to reset them. We tried external tools. There was no luck with that. And it ultimately boiled down into this thing where the server had been live for a week. People were super hyped. So like they were, even though the server was crashing like quite regularly, people were still hopping on and playing like as soon as it would relaunch. And at this point, like a week had gone by and people had made like decent progress on the server, right? And so me and Cypher were kind of faced with a challenge or a crossroads where this server is going to keep crashing. Like these chunks are corrupted. There's really nothing we can do to fix it. So do we have this mess of a server that crashes every 30, 45 minutes and it isn't going to be suitable for like a lot of players? And then also on top of that, like the expectation too is that me and Cypher like record videos on the server, right? So if we're recording a segment for a video and all of a sudden the server just crashes in the middle of a recording, like that could ruin the whole recording essentially, right? So that's like another aspect of it as well. And it also just looked like super unprofessional, right? Like people were getting angry. When the server would crash, sometimes it would set people's like inventories back to like a previous state. So they would like lose items that they had just obtained, or, other things that it would just cause general weirdness and bugginess, right? So we came to the crossroads and ultimately had to come to the decision where the server, and by the server, I really just mean like the world on the server, had to be reset, right? And this was to this day, like this is probably the most difficult decision when it comes to YouTube, and definitely like when it comes to interacting with people who are fans of the content and everything. Like this is probably the most difficult decision I've ever had to like deal with personally. Like this was not taken lightly. It was very it was very upsetting for both me and Cypher. Like it definitely took like a mental toll on us, like behind the scenes and everything, where we're sitting here thinking like, oh, we finally kind of gotten our idea off the ground. We've exposed this idea to so many people, and people obviously love it, but we're gonna have to reset all their progress, and like they might just like hate us for that, you know. There might not be like any coming back from this. And that sounds very pessimistic, and hindsight now, things were probably not that dire, like I don't think people would actually hate us. They would probably, maybe one or two people would actually be upset, but everybody else would probably be pretty fine. But we decided like we're going to reset the server, and so we made a huge announcement. We apologized profusely. We're like, hey guys, we're so sorry that the server has to be reset, but like we think ultimately this is the best course of action. Yes, you have been playing for a week, but like wouldn't it be better to reset now instead of like a month from now when you've had like a ton of progress built up and everything? And so we reset the server, right? It was a insane experience because we had to reset the world. We were able to get the seed, right? So the same seed was used for the world, and we basically had to rebuild the city layout, because that's the other thing too. With the plots and everything, we had to build a city layout for like where these people were going to live and like play out and everything. We also had like apartment buildings for people who couldn't necessarily like, because we were going to have limited plot spaces, right? So we implemented like an apartment system where like you could still live in an apartment building and like do stuff in the apartment, decorate it however you want, have a chest for storage, everything, but like just a little less freedom than a plot. And it ultimately came to a point where, you know, all that had to be redone. And to be 100% honest with you, I think when we did redo it the second time, the layout was a lot cleaner. It was a lot nicer. We were able to get more player plots down. So more people had plots, less people were in apartments. I think overall it was a good experience, right? And surprisingly, like, yeah, people were kind of initially upset with us, but also at the same time, they were super understanding. They went along, like they were like, you know what, like it's okay, like as long like if this fixes the server and everything works, I'll be fine with that. And we really didn't lose that many players from the whole reset. I think maybe we lost like 20. No, we didn't even lose that many. I think at most we lost like 10 people who like actually like were upset by the server, left and like never came back, right? Which is, you know, that's a really good, kind of conversion rate if you think about it, where, we have like almost 400 people in this Discord server. But yeah, so we did the reset, and that was a huge undertaking. That took a couple of days and everything like that. And we did another relaunch, right? So something similar to where we had to accept people, get them whitelisted, all this and that and everything. By this point, I do believe we were like looking into getting like a community staff team going. And I do think for the second launch, we actually did have people in the community who, no, I actually don't think we had people helping us yet with the second launch. I think it was still too early for that, but we definitely some point around that time started developing our team of community managers who were people who are basically just going to help us with like moderation and like running commands and things. So it wasn't just all me and Cypher. But the second launch went a lot smoother than the first launch. People were there for it in a way that like as basically like as soon as we called your name, like people were on getting their plot, getting their Pokemon. Like it was like a really streamlined process. We did super good with the second launch. Big shout out to Cypher because he handled that. He handled a lot of that. I unfortunately had class that day, so I was there for a little bit of it, but he did most of the heavy lifting on that second launch day. And things just kind of from there like went smoothly. Like we definitely experience like less crashes. We still get an occasional crash every once in a while due to like a memory leak issue with one of the mods we're using, the simple voice mod will cause it. But this happens like, maybe once every 2 weeks, like, and that's if we're not restarting the server, which we need to be doing anyway. And which we kind of do frequently ish, we do it pretty kind of often. But the main thing though, that is like the takeaway from this is that, we had to do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, after it finally successfully got launched. We're talking at this point, you know, we're just getting to the point where people can just play on the server and like play the game normally, right? And we're probably at this point not even 2 weeks, like we're probably like a good like month, right? At this point that I'm kind of talking about and referring to into like the actual, like after the video has been released, right? So, that creates kind of a sense of pressure because it's like, oh, well, I want to upload again, right? I want to make another video. I want it to be impactful. I want it to be good. And I definitely want it to be timely and, come out at a decent time, right? But there were hurdles that kept presenting themselves like over and over and over again that just didn't allow us to, I guess, like play the game or record the game. Like I said earlier, we had to recruit like an entire community management team. And that was a process. We had to make applications for that and vet people and kind of like, I wouldn't say it was like an interview process, but it kind of was. And ultimately decide on who should be a community manager and who shouldn't be. We also had to work out, behind the scenes things with that, like so certain requirements and permissions and updates to the mod pack because there were certain bugs that would cause issues or break the game or everything like that. And ultimately, time kept going on, kept dragging on, and we just kept getting busier and busier with different things. And, you know, we kind of hit this point where I feel like it was like, oh my God, like we're not playing on this server, right? We're not recording on the server. We're literally just running this server for other people to play, right? And that's kind of a scary feeling when, I don't want to say that it like turned into a job because, we're not making money from this. We're not doing anything like that, but it's kind of weird to think when this thing that was supposed to be fun and was supposed to be intriguing and kind of just like this like project that you're working on the side and everything turns into this really kind of big thing, right? That has a lot of moving parts, has a lot of people interacting with it, and has kind of a chokehold on you from every single day, like you're logging in. At least for me, right? This was my day for like a good month and a half, right? Was I'd wake up, open my phone, check Discord, look at all the different, look at all the different tickets that have been submitted because we have a ticket system in the Discord that allows for people to submit their issues or like bugs or requests for certain things that we, provide on the server and everything like that. And so I'd wake up, check tickets, pretty much right after that, I'd take a shower. I would go log in on Geometra. I would do admin duties for like a good, couple hours of the day. I would then go to class because I am a college student. So I would go to class after that and be at class from pretty much, like a good chunk of my day, like probably a good 5 or 6 hours of my day. And then after I get out of class, I would go to work because I have to work. I've got bills and stuff I got to pay for, and get home about 10 o'clock that night and log back on Geometra. There would be a lot that would happen while I was gone. A lot of tickets, a lot of things to catch up on and everything, and player activity and behavior and stuff like that. And then, go and work on Geometra stuff for like probably another 6 to 7 hours, right? Like it, at a certain point, it really fully consumed my life, almost probably to like an unhealthy degree. And, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I wouldn't really change anything now. I feel like those sacrifices that I made were for the greater good of getting it off the ground and things like that. But I definitely got in this cycle, right, where I didn't even realize how much time was passing by. And I hit this point about, 2 weeks ago as of this video coming out, or not even 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks now at this point. But I was like, hey, like this was supposed to be a YouTube series. Like I was supposed to make videos on this server. I was supposed to interact with people and have fun and, tell a story. And I'm not doing that. Right. And in a way, like, that's not fair to the people who don't play on the server, right? Who only can watch the videos because of whatever limitations they have. That's not fair to me as the person who wants to make the video. So I kind of took a step back and I was like, hey, like, I think that I really need to like lock in. I've been saying that a lot on the Geometra server. If you know, peep game and lock in. But I had to lock in and really decide like, hey, I'm gonna make a video, right? And this is also kind of where the idea of the podcast spurred, right? Because I was like, well, I can, record the video and probably have this really, this big segment of the video where it's like, hey guys, where have I been for the last like 2 months or whatever. But I don't think anybody like wants to hear that like in the video, right? I feel like that would just kill like people's attention. Like, you'd be like, oh brother, like this guy's about to go and talk for 15 minutes about this thing that I don't really care about. Like, I just want to see what's going on in the Minecraft video. Right. And so that's where I kind of came up with the idea of the podcast, right? Like, I was like, well, maybe there's some people that actually would care to know what's been going on and everything. So I'll, take a leap of faith. I'll start this podcast and maybe it'll be great. Maybe it'll be fun. Maybe it'll be exciting. But maybe it won't, you never know until you try something. Right. But I ultimately decided, the video is going to be, I'm going to lean heavy into the story aspects of it. And if you've seen the latest video, you can probably see that, right? Like there's almost no fluff. There's no filler. There's nothing like that when it comes to, just stuff that is not part of an actual, part of the story, I guess, is the real thing. Like there's maybe like the tiniest microcosm of it, but there's really not. And that's very different for me. That's a very big shift in content for me. Normally I am a 40-minute to an hour plus video type of guy after editing. And this is my first video that I think, looking at the timeline now, I think it's like sub 20 minutes, right? Which is just, that's an insane concept for me. I've literally never done that. But I will say that I am feeling a little weary about it being so short, but I also feel like too that what I have done with it is that I have, for those 16 minutes that the video is that I have jam-packed it full with information and visuals and things that are relevant to the story I'm trying to tell. And there's really nothing in it that is like not super, there's nothing in it that's like feels unnecessary, right? I feel like everything that's in there is super necessary to kind of the story and the plot I'm diving into. So I'm satisfied with that. I'm satisfied with it. But yeah, I kind of just, got into the video making mindset. I feel like I've done some of my best work on this last video. I've really gotten kind of into the creative process of video making, really looking into effects and transitions and, color grading and, aspect ratios and filming certain shots from certain angles to convey meaning. And, and like, I'm not a person who knows anything about like film or video or like anything like that. But at the end of the day, I think what I've done is like pretty good for somebody who doesn't know anything about that. And it's definitely pretty good compared to some of my other videos. Back in the day, I used to just throw in the recording software, throw on some lo-fi hip hop and just, pump out a 40-minute video of just like me just doing whatever. Right. And, there's definitely a niche for that. And there's definitely a kind of a nostalgic feel for that. I don't disagree, with people who enjoy that type of content. It's just, something I'm trying to kind of shift away from in the current state of things. But yeah, that's kind of the rundown though with what's been going on with Geometra. I haven't listened to this back yet. I'm still recording this actively. So if that was just the most atrocious yap sesh of, ever, wow, nice English there, Panda. But if that was just an atrocious yap sesh, I apologize. If you made it this far through it, then congratulations to you. You've listened to me talk for as long as I have. But kind of one more thing I kind of wanted to end the video off with, and something that is kind of an interesting step for me as a YouTube creator and as somebody who makes content and everything like that, is I want to talk about some things and I kind of want your opinions on it in the comments. So if you're listening to this part right now, leave a comment down below of how you feel about this and everything. But I recently obtained a monetization status on my YouTube channel, right? And that I feel like it's a double-edged sword, right? Like that's super exciting, that's super interesting. I feel like the goal, well, maybe not for some people, but like it's and I honestly, you know what, I wouldn't even say for me, the goal of the YouTube is like not to make money, right? Like I have never looked at it from a perspective of like, oh, like I need to throw everything into this because I need to make money from this. I am actively going to college. I'm trying to get a degree in software development and everything like that. So that's kind of, I'm not going to say like my path in life, because you never know until you've kind of lived through it and everything. But like, I've really been doing the YouTube side of things just as like a fun little hobby. I grew up watching YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube from a lot of different people, and it's always been this thing of like, oh, it's like this fun little thing I can pop on, I can make a video, I can have fun with some friends and really just create something. And like low key, it's kind of like a little video diary in a way. Like you can kind of look back and see like, oh yeah, like I remember when I made this video. And uh even though like you, the viewer, might not know it, right? Like there's certain videos that I can look back on and be like, oh yeah, like this is what was going on in my life during that point in time. And like it's crazy to think that like that was going on at the same time I was making these videos and everything. And I don't know, there's something about that that has a nice little ring to it. But the kind of the point I'm trying to get into though and get around to is that I recently unlocked the first stage of YouTube monetization, right? And with that, that unlocks channel memberships for my YouTube channel, right? And it's kind of something that I've been going back and forth on a lot because on one hand, I've heard vocally in the community from Geometra and just from other things, that there are people who would like to support me, financially and support some of the projects I work on financially, Geometra specifically. And I am kind of at this crossroads where it's like, okay, well, do I accept money from people? Because, that's a weird feeling. Like, I have to say that first off. Like, when I make these silly little YouTube videos and I play Minecraft, like, it's weird to think that somebody would be like, oh, yeah, like, I'd like to pay you money that I've earned for that, right? It's a very kind of jarring experience. But the other aspect of it, too, is like, well, I don't want to just take someone's money, right? That feels wrong. And, maybe for them it doesn't, but for me, like, I feel like, when you introduce money into the equation, it should be, I don't want to use the word transactional because that feels really like shallow and kind of gross, but I feel like somebody should receive something for the money that they, contribute towards something. So I guess what I'm kind of getting at and kind of here with the ending of this topic and discussion of, monetization, money, all that fun stuff is I've kind of floated an idea around and I'm going to hold off and I'm going to wait until I see how this first episode of the podcast does. But one format that I've always kind of really liked with some of the popular podcasts that I listen to pretty regularly is that when people do a podcast, right? Sometimes they'll have like an exclusive like bonus episode or bonus show or something, right? That you essentially subscribe to them. You pay like a couple bucks a month or something. And when you do that, you get access to this show and everything. And I honestly thought, hey, like maybe this is the way that I could enable monetization on my channel, get some income from the YouTube stuff. And to be honest with you, what that would look like right now, as far as like, if I did receive income, it would probably all just go back into Geometra, between server cost and like, we do like custom models as well on Geometra. So like custom Cobblemon models that aren't in the base game. So it'd probably go towards that as well. But basically just, syncing it back into YouTube stuff and everything like that. And I think that, I would adopt that model though of like, if this podcast thing works out and people like it and they're interested in it, we have like this base kind of like free episode, if you want to call it that. And then you would have like the membership episode, right? Where like maybe we talk about, different things that are like more, out there and wild. And, like I don't know. I don't know what it would look like. Maybe it would just look like, whenever the podcast drops, you just get an extra hour of me just yapping. You know what I mean? Maybe somebody would be interested in that, but I kind of wanted to present that to y'all and bring it up and mention it because, if you've made it this far into the podcast, I would maybe hope that you like the idea of that potentially. Maybe not, I could always be wrong, but I'm putting it here at the end so that way people who like actually are interested in it could potentially comment on it and not somebody who watches like the first 10 seconds and be like, "Oh yeah, like you should totally do that." And then like, there's nothing that kind of is built upon that. So yeah, that's kind of my question to you guys in the comments. Would you like to see a channel membership option where, you pay a certain amount each month, but then you get access to like a bonus episode or, maybe some sneak peeks for videos of geometry, like I want to make sure that you're getting something from, donating money to me as the content creator, right? I don't feel like it should ever be a system where you just throw money at me blindly and I just give nothing in return. So let me know what you think of that in the comments, guys. I think ultimately, I'm going to maybe still wait on that a little bit. I'll kind of, get a consensus and I'll talk with some other people and see kind of what the vibe is for it. Maybe that's just like completely not the move and we just won't do that. But yeah, it's been awesome. I thank you all for listening. This is kind of where I'm going to wrap things off because I feel like I've been going on for quite a bit here. Thanks for listening though. This is the Pink Lemonade podcast again. And I'm So Panda and thank you guys for tuning in. Have a good one, y'all.